Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining our podcast today. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're combining forces a little bit. At Bridgemark, we tell our clients all the time that one of our biggest competitive advantages is just the amount of consultants we have inside of our organization, the experience, the amount of people we have with ears to the ground, talking with financial advisors just like yourself, and that combined knowledge together can really benefit a financial advisor in their due diligence process. So today, we're combining forces of Corey Walen, myself, Brett Waterfield, and Travis Boak, and two different podcasts as well, Firm Transitions and the Advisory Strategy Room. Just to answer the question, why are so many financial advisors changing firms right now? The recruiting activity this year in 2026 is already 16% ahead of an exceptionally strong 2025. So, one of the most common questions we get from financial advisors when we're first starting a consultation with them are, why are so many financial advisors leaving our firm? What are they gaining on the other side? What does life look like on the other side? So, we just combined forces today to answer some of those questions and talk about what we're seeing. Brett, Travis, thanks for coming on today and combining forces. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were actually just talking for about an hour before this in one of our calls. So this is the perfect time to have this conversation. But
Yeah, I think it is timely in that, just to kind of touch on your point of sort of the knowledge that collectively we bring as a group, where we have these weekly hour-long calls, team calls with all the consultants on the team, where we're really discussing what's happening in the industry. And just on this past call, talking about why advisors are moving. So I'm happy to and excited to get into it.
Absolutely. I think it's a great question, and I think we probably all get asked it all the time, not just from advisors, but just when we're talking to friends, family about what we do. Is like, why do advisors change firms? Like, I was literally on a call yesterday with somebody not in the business, and they're like, well, why do advisors change firms? Like, what's going on? And it's always a kind of hard question to answer, because I think it is somewhat individualized, right? Like, there's not one perfect firm, otherwise every advisor would be there, and there's not one reason that drives them out, otherwise every firm would just fix that one reason. So I think the question has multiple answers, and I'm excited to dive into it with both of you.
yeah, I think it's super important because all financial advisors have pain points at their firm. Like you said, Brett, there's no perfect solution out there, but I think this is going to be a really big educational podcast for financial advisors, just to, number one, help them understand why they're picking up and taking a look at other options out there, but also, what's really attracting them to the other side, and, what are some of the things that when advisors pick up their head could potentially, they're going to see when they do their exploration. So, I'll just start with, a really wide reason I see a lot of financial advisors wanting to take a look. And the first one is just the search for greater autonomy. As financial advisors become more sophisticated, as they grow their business, as their clients become more sophisticated, they're just looking for different options, whether it comes from technology or investment availability. And we're going to dig into a bunch of these, I'm sure, later in the podcast. But just high level, I have so many financial advisors come to me and say, Corey, I've been in the business for 20 years. I've been doing things the right way. I've been staying out of trouble. I just want to be left alone to do what's right for my clients without dealing with this compliance friction and working inside of this little box. I just want to be able to be creative and be able to figure out of the box solutions for my clients without just being asked no every time I want to do something outside of the box. So that's a main conversation that I see almost in every conversation that I have.
Yeah, and I think not only from an investment or product offering standpoint, but also from a marketing standpoint, right? These advisors now, podcasts have become huge. They want to market themselves in different creative ways. And so, the question becomes, is my firm aligned? Is the supervision part of my firm aligned with the creativity that I'm trying to put out there? Or would, that better be suited for a different firm?
Yeah, and I think we talk about it all the time, is has an advisor outgrown their firm, right? And I think that touches on this question of gaining more autonomy. And when an advisor moves, obviously the two overall hopefully benefits of that is improving their business, but it's also, and probably more importantly, is improving the experience for their clients, making things better for their clients. And I think when an advisor looks at, should I move, and what firm to move to and things like that, they have to say, is it in my best interest as a business, and is it in my client's best interest? And so gaining that autonomy, a lot of times I feel like advisors successfully build their business and they get to a point where the firm that they're aligned with prevents them from serving their clients the way they think they should, and in the client's best interest. And I think at that point they need some flexibility. And I don't think it's a secret that a lot of firms manage from a compliance standpoint and a platform standpoint to the lowest common denominator, right? And so as you grow and you change and evolve your practice, maybe you need some more autonomy to branch out and do things that aren't, outside the scope of compliance, but just maybe outside the scope of what your firm allows.
100%. I mean, let's give a couple specific examples to that, just out of real life conversations that we've had recently. So I just had one with a W-2 financial advisor, a million and a half producer. They have one administrative assistant, and they are growing 35% year over year. Like, this advisor has gotten to a point where they need to make a decision between, am I going to grow more and erode my quality of life with me and my family and have to work more hours? Or, am I going to have to, pull this back a little bit? Because inside of his organization, he needs to get to 2.5 million in trailing 12 production in order to get another administrative assistant, where that's completely backwards at another firm. Like, you scale and get additional administrative assistants to build scale, build capacity, keep the same level of service for your clients while continuing to grow. And this firm is saying, grow first, and then we'll give you the administrative assistant. So that's the perfect example of autonomy, where a financial advisor is looking, they say, hey, I want to be able to make that decision without going to my firm and begging for something. That's just something I want to be able to make right away. Do you guys have any other examples?
To take that a step further, I mean, some of these firms, right, they restrict the type of clients that you can even service, right? They have to be at a certain asset level in order for you to even be able to service them, right, and be compensated for the service on their business. So, I mean, it's not only these production hurdles that are kind of holding them back from growing the way they want to, but it's also restricting who they can take on as a client and who they can't.
Yeah, and I think it's, Corey, to your example too, I think this is in most cases, it's not one reason. Some of these reasons start to blend into others, right? So, when I think about your scenario you just described, I think of an advisor that I've worked with, who, a couple of partners, very large practice, and they told me, they said, hey, over the last 5 years, everybody in our firm's gotten a raise except for us, the principal owners. And as they grow, and this is more of an independent, I think you're talking more of a W-2 advisor, but even on the independent side, they have to, when growth happens, you have to hire and bring on staff and things like that to service it. And so my point overall being that you want more autonomy, but is the technology there? Are the resources there to help you scale your practice? So whether it's being limited by hiring and adding staff, or being given the resources from a tech standpoint, and what's approved at your firm to allow you to create more capacity and service your growing business without having to potentially hire. So I think the autonomy goes into technology limitations, product limitations, hiring limitations, compliance limitations. What's the box, right?
I mean, just to recap, like, almost every conversation that I have in one way or another when it comes to autonomy, it's like, I've earned my black belt as a financial advisor. Like, I'm doing the right things. I have the client satisfaction scores. I don't have any U5 dings, and yet I'm still getting treated like a financial advisor that is going through the training program at their same, organization. And that just eventually at some point leads to a lot of frustration. But Brett, I mean, you just mentioned a lot of, other things that I think we should talk about in the podcast today. So, just in the search of greater autonomy, just like more specifically, access to better investment solutions. I mean, all the time I have conversations with financial advisors that, just giving a high level overview, they've become more sophisticated. They're over time, their clients have grown. They're attracting more sophisticated clients. The average ultra high net worth individual has more than 40% of their business in private assets, not in public assets. And they want access to more out of the box solutions. And I'm just seeing that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, just recently I started working with an advisor who is a SEPA. So he works with a lot of small business owners, right? And eventually they're going to sell that business, and there's going to be a big liquidity event. And he's at a firm right now where he doesn't have, a lot of tax harvesting strategies available to him, right? He doesn't have a robust platform of alternatives that are going to allow those clients to take some of that money they make in that sale, right, and defer taxes on it, put it into something that's, going to keep earning them a return, right? But they're not going to get hit with the taxes all at once. So just to kind of piggyback on what you're talking about there, more sophisticated clients needing more sophisticated resources. That's certainly something that a lot of firms, again, we're talking about managing to the lowest common denominator, right? They're not going to have those sort of offerings, right? So it's finding maybe a different solution that's a little bit more niche that gives you more flexibility and freedom.
Yeah, and I think it's to add on to that, there's new products coming out all the time, right? Like you mentioned alternatives, and that, like, you've got buffered products. There's a whole host of stuff. And so, I was at an industry conference a couple of years ago, and a board member from one of the firms made a comment that the industry goes through a major shift every 3 to 5 years. And that could be compliance shift, product shift, technology shift, things like that. And, a lot of the products that we see out there didn't even exist 10 years ago. And so, does my firm allow it, and how quickly does my firm adopt these new investment products and things like that, right? Like those limitations. And so, again, I don't think anybody's looking to do anything wrong, but it's the ability to, as an advisor, to evaluate what investments are best for my clients and serve my clients the best, and then having the autonomy to be able to pick and choose what they think is best, and not having it limited.
One other thing that I'm seeing when it comes to just investment solutions, investments aren't just, private credit and private investments and direct indexing. I think financial advisors are getting really excited about truly just being able to shop the street for whatever it is for their clients, whether it's trust services or tax services or lending or some of the other things that we've mentioned. I think a lot of financial advisors that I'm working with, they're getting so excited when they dig in about some of the tools and capabilities on the RIA channel, where all inside of one firm, they could have access to the best and brightest at Raymond James, Fidelity, Schwab, Goldman Sachs, and depending on what their clients need, they could shop the investment solutions, the lending solutions, the resources of all of those different firms, instead of just being beholden to one clearing organization and one set of solutions. For most financial advisors, taking a look at some of these other firms, for 90% of them, just one other firm with some more access to some of these things might be enough. But for financial advisors that are taking a look and want 100% access to the whole industry, their minds are being blown with the RIA side.
No, I couldn't agree more with you there. I think, there's consolidation happening all over the space, but I do think that even in the RIA space, it seems to be expanding in my eyes more than it's consolidating. There's more options that I don't think a lot of advisors are even aware of, right? And so when you think about product, more importantly, technology availability in that RIA space and what firms are able to do to better serve clients and help advisors run a practice and ultimately prepare them and position themselves better for a monetization event down the road from a succession planning standpoint. It used to be where, do I set up my own RIA or do I stay in the BD world? And now it's, I can stay in the BD world. I can go hybrid and set up my own RIA, but have, a BD relationship, which has existed. But now there's so many RIA solutions. It's, do I set up my own RIA? Do I stay in the BD world? Do I join an RIA? Like, there's so many options out there, and, with Bridgemark, I tell advisors and tell people, like, we work with 150 different firms. They're like, I didn't know there was 150 different firms, right? But a lot of those are RIAs, and the offering that they're doing and what they're doing from an AI standpoint, a tech integration standpoint, and access to product, everything like that, I do think is a real game changer.
Yeah. And I think, I almost refer to them as like an RIA platform, right? You're still a 1099 independent advisor. You can still brand yourself whatever you want, right? Your own unique brand and logo, but you're plugging onto their platform. You have optionality with who you want to custody with, right? You've got all sorts of new investment solutions. But I think really you hit the nail on the head, Brett, is where I'm seeing sort of this RIA space sort of be leaps and bounds over a traditional broker dealer space, and that's technology. And it's the integration of AI. And a lot of these firms are smaller and they don't have the, FINRA oversight. So they're able to be more nimble in adapting that technology. And, in the areas that we're seeing them adapted is all designed to make an advisor more efficient, right? The advisor's having a call with a client, the call is being recorded. As soon as that call is over, right, there's all these things happening in the background, right? And nothing is sent to a client without an advisor getting eyes on it first, right? And so they've kind of covered from a regulatory standpoint, all, everything is up to, up to code there. But we're just seeing some of the technology demonstrations that I've been on recently have just been completely different than what I'm used to seeing in the traditional large IBD space.
Let's talk about that for a second. So, I mean, the next topic that I wanted to cover, Travis, is technology. Like, I have so many financial advisors reaching out to me right now, and they're saying, Corey, I feel like if I don't make a move now, like, my firm is never going to catch up with the technological advances that are out there. Take a look at the Michael Kitces technology map. You see what's going on with AI in the industry. I think a lot of financial advisors, they seriously feel like them being part of a big box organization where does extensive due diligence and takes a year plus to roll things out. They're saying, Corey, by the time we get version 1, other firms are going to be on version 6.0. Yeah. So I hear that a lot. I don't know about you guys.
No, absolutely. I think it's a huge issue. And I think we would all agree, when you talk about AI, there's a concern, obviously, that, well, will AI replace financial advisors? And I think we would probably all agree that we don't subscribe to that belief. But me personally, I think that the advisors who adopt AI into their practice and create those efficiencies will grow and will outperform the ones that don't. And so that means aligning yourself with firms that are utilizing AI in ways that create that efficiency. And I know we were all part of a conversation with a large RIA who was utilizing AI and can show that they've added 8 hours of capacity a week to an advisor's practice. And so the what's happening from a technology standpoint, I mean, just look at from a CRM standpoint, right? 5 years ago, it was, oh, this is the one CRM we used. Oh, then we added a second one. Now there's a third one. And that doesn't mean that there isn't more, but there's a barrier of entry for, certain technologies to get into those, as you call them, big box firms because of compliance and everything like that. And so how do you get access to cutting edge technology? And then it's who's doing a good job of integrating different components of technology. Can the CRM talk to your planning tool? Can it talk to your trading tool? Can it talk like it's, you know, you can have all these isolated pieces of technology, but then being able to create connectivity between them. And I think that's where the flexibility in the RIA space is really doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, and it's all designed really to give an advisor, you know, more of their most precious resource, and that's time. Right. When I first started in the industry, I was a cold caller for a firm, National Planning Corporation. And one of the things that, you know, we would ask an advisor on the phone is like, hey, if I could give you, you know, 2 hours back in your day, would you be, you know, willing to continue the conversation? You know, something like that. And what we're seeing is in the real world, these technologies and the integration is 100% giving advisors more time back in their day that they can then use to continue to grow their business.
I think it's super exciting that, you know, going back to, I just want to be left alone to make the decisions that are right for my clients, like that to be able to, you know, choose the chassis of your race car, a Schwab or Fidelity or a Goldman Sachs, and then you're building all the aftermarket parts onto it, like specifically for your business. There's a lot of financial advisors that are really, really excited about that control. And if something winds up not working out well, having the ability to bolt it off and plug something else in and just having that optionality versus having the mercy, being at the mercy of your firm for to wait for their next, you know, 5-year tech rollout to be able to make changes is something that a lot of people are really, really exciting about. I mean, we could talk about technology for hours. I mean, do you guys have anything in like specifics that where you've been exploring with financial advisors where it's just, you know, totally blown their mind in terms of the efficiencies that they could get back on their day to day?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on another topic there too that I want to dive into, but from a technology standpoint, you know, just the utilization of AI agents behind the scenes to integrate data from different systems to, you know, creating what would take a human to go out there and gather information. Maybe it's just like meeting prep, right? Like what do you need to do meeting prep? And I got to hire somebody who's going to do my meeting prep, and they're going to go into the vault, and they're going to go into the CRM tool, and they're going to go into, you know, the account tool and look at like what the vet and being able to take something that might take hours to do a meeting prep, having an AI agent that can go into multiple systems and bring that together in a matter of minutes. Like that's, you know, allowing you not to get rid of staff, but maybe reallocate that staff to more revenue producing or client servicing, you know, activities that improves the quality of service that your firm delivers to your clients. But so that it's, you know, that's where I think it's from a tech standpoint, from a real life standpoint, what we're seeing out there that firms are doing, that's been amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's that example of just everything kind of going on behind the scenes after one phone call, right? You hang up the phone call, you've got all of your meeting notes right there in your CRM. You've got maybe someone that's a paraplanner starting the financial plan. You've got somebody that's building out a portfolio, right? You've got already a follow up with the client. So these are things that you would typically have to do manually that are just automatically done as soon as you hit hang up in the background, right? And then you're going to see that financial plan, you're going to see that portfolio right before it gets pushed to the end client. But these are just things happening all behind the scenes. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. And Corey, I want to touch on, because you had said something that I think tied into the autonomy, you know, conversation. Like again, these things are somewhat intertwined.
Sure.
And obviously we're not just, you know, pushing the RIA space, right? Like there's solutions and there's no one for everybody. But when it comes to that autonomy, and you named a bunch of custodians, it's the ability in that space when your business demands it to not be tied to one platform, right? Like in the RIA world, now you can be multi-custody. So I can choose Fidelity, I can choose Schwab, I can have clients with accounts at both of those firms, or, you know, it's not a one solution. And for an advisor, I'm working with an advisor right now who through acquisition and their decisions has been at 5 different firms in probably the last, call it 8 to 9 years. And they said, like, we never wanted to change firms again. We chose the firm we're at right now because we never wanted to change again, but because of some restrictions, like now they're looking again. And we talked about the RIA world, because now it's like, hey, if I put my accounts at Schwab or I put my accounts at Fidelity or most of these custodians, if I changed RIAs, I don't have to repaper those accounts per se, right? Like that's a different transition than going from an IBD to an IBD. And, we work with folks that are at RIAs that are moving from one RIA to another RIA, but they don't have to change their custodian. So it makes that autonomy of where a client account goes. Maybe I'm buying a book of business and it's at one of the custodians. And so that seller doesn't have to move. So the autonomy of platform is different in that RIA space than it is in anywhere else in the industry.
Yeah. And one of the questions that I'm sure you both get and I get all the time is, hey, can you help me buy a book? Right. And so I always like to use the analogy, well, what pond are you fishing from? And so in an RIA, on an RIA platform, right, you've got the two major custodians, Schwab, Fidelity, right? You're fishing from the biggest pond, where these advisors that want to sell, right, they want the path of least resistance, among other things, right? But they're already on those platforms, so they don't have to move. And now you've got an ocean to fish from for looking for books to purchase.
100%. We could talk about what you guys just talked about on like a whole other podcast and the power of that and like how it's like led to financial advisor growth. But like really quick from the AI standpoint, one other thing I just wanted to cover really quick. I 100% agree with everything you guys said about like bringing time back into your day. But I also think it's helping financial advisors get into conversations that they weren't necessarily always part of in the beginning to, I know it's an overused word, but run a more holistic practice. Like I just saw a demo of wealth.com the other day, and it's to help financial advisors just dive deeper into the estate planning. And normally financial advisors really aren't part of estate planning. They introduce to an estate planning attorney. You fill out a 1,000-page questionnaire in terms of your wants, needs, your goals. And then the attorney builds out this 100-page document that the client doesn't understand. It takes you hours to read through. Things like wealth.com now are integrated with AI. So when you bring a client in, you could insert their estate documents and trust documents into their system, and it is analyzing it for gaps. It's summarizing it in a way both the client and the financial advisor could understand without spending, 20 hours looking through it. It's giving suggestions to talk with the client about based on, some of their life changes. So it's also giving the ability for financial advisors to go deeper. Same with Holistiplan. I mean, it reads 1040s and tax schedules and turns tax returns into like client ready summaries. It gives like bracket visualizations. It gives different tax scenarios and talking about how acting now versus later could impact down the road. So once again, a conversation that was normally sent out to a CPA, most firms can't even mention the word tax. It's helping financial advisors like dive much deeper and be a bigger part of the whole picture as well.
Yeah, and I think it closes silos, right? Like if you have your financial advisor and they refer you over to a CPA, or you have a CPA and you have an estate planning attorney, and you have these different silos of things in your life, and the advisor who sits at the center of all of this, being able to not do those jobs, but to start to integrate them and bring them together and truly be the quarterback of the client's financial world. And you can get tax advice from your CPA, but if it's investment related and that doesn't get communicated to your financial advisor, now it's dependent on the client to communicate this, and do they do an effective job? So if the advisor expands not what they're doing per se, but their ability to connect all of these silos, I think that's extremely powerful and increases the value of the advisor to the relationship and improves what they're offering their clients.
What other topics have you been seeing out there in the industry when you've been speaking with advisors that have been common?
Go ahead, Travis.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks, Brett. Yeah, I mean, I think that one that's kind of an age-old pain point is, I feel just like a number, right? I'm a number at my firm. It's a vendor firm, and it's one that I hear a lot. And when you start to peel that back, right, what does that really mean? And when you think about the recruiting process, right, you're going through this process and you're meeting all these people at the firm, and you've got your person that's going to help with, whether it's wealth management, marketing, right? You've got your people. And then I started thinking, a lot of these advisors have been at their firm for 10, 15, 20 years. That person comes and goes and changes. And every time there's turnover, you kind of lose that connection of, when I joined this firm, I really liked all the people that were my people, and now they're gone, and whoever replaced them are gone. And so you're just kind of out there on an island where you've kind of lost that personal connection. And it really makes you, again, just kind of feel like just a number.
Yeah, I was actually going to hit on that same thing. And I think it does tie into the consolidation that we're seeing out there, which is, another topic. But we've all worked with advisors say, I just need the firm to solve my problems when an issue comes up, pay me well, and leave me alone. And then there's advisors who are looking for resources to grow and things like that. So some of them, are okay with just being a number as long as the tech works, the service is good, and things like that. The turnover you talk about, like, that starts to affect some of those areas, obviously. But there was a study done years ago. I haven't really checked to see the updated, but I don't think it would have changed. And I think we would all agree, as we help advisors evaluate, feel, fit, and financials through a evaluation process, that feel. And the study said that most advisors choose firms based on culture. So the feeling like a number, to me, like, really goes to culture. And my concern is, as consolidation continues and firms get bigger and things like that happen, is, do you lose culture? Right. And we all know smaller firms that really tout culture. And so and it's a really hard thing for advisors to evaluate, is what is a culture of a firm, especially if it gets big. Right. And so I know we all encourage advisors ultimately to go and do home office visits, because I think that is ultimately a great way to see culture. Like, walk the halls, see how it is. Like, how do the people seem happy working there? Do you like the people that work there? What's the firm philosophy and everything like that? And then combine that with references. Talk to advisors that are with that firm, and ideally ones that move from the firm that you're at, to see what is the culture. Do they know who I am? How important is that? And so it's a tough thing to weigh, of serving your clients the way you want to serve it, and being, how well does my firm know me? And it can be a struggle, but ultimately I think the field is a huge factor and very important to advisors to evaluate.
I'll give a perfect example of what I think, like, feeling like just a rep number potentially is. I'm speaking with a top 3% team at an independent broker dealer right now. They've been at the same firm for 25 years. They've grown year over year, like 25%. They are an absolute rock star of a firm. Like, never ask for anything from the firm whatsoever. But it's gotten to a point where, when they went to the firm, there was 2,000 financial advisors, and now there's many multiples more of that. And the advisor said to me, Corey, if I have a problem, like, I can't even reach leadership to complain. They won't even hear me. I talk with some, vice president or assistant vice president, and I'm not even able to talk with somebody that's going to be able to make change. We don't get any recognition. We're not looking for that. But, I used to be part of a firm where, when I had issues, I could at least reach out to leadership and complain. Something might not have been done, but at least I can reach out to someone and air my grievances. And now I just feel like I don't have a voice at all. And I can't tolerate that anymore.
Yeah. And I think it probably ties into, feeling like a number and feeling heard. but it's also who's owning the issue. Like when there's a service issue or there's a something that's maybe a little bit more complex, does it get lost? Does anybody own it? And that smaller feel, being heard, I think comes with and can be solved in a lot of cases just by having individuals that own my problem and don't let it go until it's resolved. And I think that's one of the things that gets lost.
No, absolutely. And to your point, Corey, I mean, in your example, I'm sure that when that advisor joined the firm, right, they could probably call the CEO or the president, right, and he'd call him back at 9 o'clock at night, right? I mean, that was sort of the culture when it was 2,000 advisors, and then they continued to grow and consolidate, right? And then now it's you know who that person is. You never met them before. So I've got an example, and this is maybe a little bit of an extreme example, but I started working with a couple advisors that are at what I call like a big box IBD. We started looking around at some other firms, and the firms were replying, "Hey, this person has a pending customer complaint." And so, I asked him about it. He said, "Well, no, it was in 2018. Okay, so here we are, 2026." He said, "That's been resolved, right?" Well, the firm sort of dropped the ball on reporting that to FINRA, and ultimately, it's just delayed his search because now he's got to go back and get that cleared up to show that it has been resolved, right? But I mean, just how an example of how when these firms get so big, stuff like that, you don't have any personal relationships. The person that he had been emailing about it when it happened is no longer there, right? So had to go back and get that resolved. But just kind of a mind-blowing example to me that he didn't even know that his broker check was reading pending.
Crazy. So, Travis, I think you mentioned this one before this topic, but flexibility in marketing, I think is a huge one. We speak with financial advisors all the time at, some W-2 firms, and them just being able to differentiate themselves, express themselves and let others know like the special things that they're doing with clients, with prospective clients and centers of influence, and just going deeper with the client relationship, like through better communication. I have that conversation all the time, but we see what else is out there in the industry and how in depth some people are going with marketing. And then, we'll look at some people's website and they're only allowed to have a bio that is, 4 sentences long. There might be 20 other people in the same town as them in the same firm, and there's like literally nothing that they can put on their website that differentiates them from their next door neighbor or their competitor. And what are you guys seeing out there from that standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, having a niche client, a lot of advisors that are good advisors, right? They'll have a certain demographic of client that this is my niche, right? These are the people that I really relate to and can kind of tailor my practice around. And so if you're stuck at a firm that's basically giving you canned marketing pieces and that's all you can use, yeah, you have no way to differentiate yourself. You have no way to market to a certain audience. You're definitely being restricted in that sense and who you can go after and how you can, get your message out there.
Yeah, I think the marketing thing is really interesting, and I think it ties into the future of the business versus the past of the business. And then we think about when I came into the business, it was here's call friends and family, and it was here's the white pages and start dialing. And now there's do not call lists, and there's restrictions on like how you grow your business, right? And social media is the current. What's the future going to look like? Whether it's what we're doing, podcasting, YouTube channels, like the marketing world and how you get in front of prospective clients is evolving with society, and maybe not as fast as technology, but it's not too far behind of how things are changing and how advisors and newer advisors to the industry can grow their business, right? I talked to a young advisor with a wirehouse, and I can't cold call, I can't do this, I can't do that. I don't know how to grow. I don't know how to, and needed to have some of those constraints removed, and going into more of an independent model started to open up some of those things for them. But then what does the future look like? And the ability to adapt to marketing and growing a business. And as you go from the current clients that you have to getting to their next generation, their kids, and how you market to that next generation, and the next generation is going to be different, right? They all buy differently, they all look differently, and so your ability to market, I think, is it's a fascinating thing. I think we could probably get some experts on to talk about it, because it's an area that I think people get constrained to, and they live within the walls of the firm that they're in, but and they don't think outside because it requires some creativity and things like that. But it's I think it's going to be very different for the next generation of advisors than it is for those today.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of financial advisors, I mean, obviously people do business with people that they like and respect. And I mean, I can't tell you how many people have like just reached out to me like for my podcast, and they're like, "Hey, I heard you like I saw you like golf." People like to do business with people they have similar interests with, but like I think financial advisors, so much growth could come from just having a few extra touches per month or per quarter with their clients. So my financial advisor is an independent financial advisor, and on a weekly basis, he sends out a newsletter. Sometimes it's just around best practices, sometimes it's macroeconomic stuff or what's going on in the news or whatever, but it's so much more impactful coming from somebody that I know and trust. Like when I read it, I'm hearing it in his voice versus getting some like macroeconomic update from a chief investment officer of some large firm that you have no relationship whatsoever, or your clients seeing you on Facebook or LinkedIn and just feeling like they're kind of part of your family. In my opinion, the more the clients see what you're doing and your family and how you're making a positive impact with other clients or in the community, like the more they're going to think about you, the more referable you're going to be. And I've seen so many financial advisors, I mean, get 30, $40 million year over year from some of their marketing efforts on top of all of the other things that they're doing. So it's a game changer.
And I think it's one, like, the three of us can personally relate to this. We're all recruiters for major firms, and we're somewhat constrained there. And now we've all gone independent, and now we're doing a podcast. We have, like what we individually in just our little space have been able to do by being independent. It's you take that and compare that, or relate it to what an advisor can and can't do. Like, we've lived it. So we're not coming from like this view that is completely outside of it. Like, there's actually a lot of correlation between what moves we've all made and what they can do.
Yeah. And I mean, even in an independent world, from an advisor's perspective, there are nuances from different firms in terms of how they go about supervising what you're putting out there, right? What's the turnaround time on if I want to post something on LinkedIn, right? Because if you're posting something that's relevant today, is it going to take 3 days to approve it and to it's no longer relevant? So these are important things to consider and to get answers to as you explore firms, is how do I work with compliance supervision to get my marketing approved and out there as fast as possible?
So, I mean, I know one more thing that we wanted to cover in the podcast today. I mean, industry consolidation and M&A there's been a lot of positives that have come along in the industry. There's also been a lot of negativity and or things that haven't worked out so well and have forced other financial advisors to look elsewhere. Do you guys want to cover that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the consolidation isn't going to go away, right? Like most of these firms are their businesses, and they're trying to grow and create economies of scale, and they have different objectives and probably different stated objectives, whether it's we want X number of advisors, we want X number of assets, we want to be, but I think growth is positive for the advisors, for the firms in a lot of cases, because the growth really helps drives the innovation and things like that. But I think when an advisor is at a firm and they evaluate the ownership, the current ownership, and the future and the potential for that firm being consolidated, they have to be aware that leadership can change, pricing can change, tech decisions can change, firm philosophy can change. And when that consolidation happens, if it happens, it's I believe it's extremely important to be prepared ahead of time. And Travis and I on a recent episode of the Advisor Strategy Room talked about having a plan B. Like you can talk with us and folks like us, not just to move, but to know what's there in case, right? Like break glass in case of an emergency, because none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen with any firm, but if something happens, take control of the situation versus having it dictated to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely have a plan B, but it also, can kind of be a blessing to an advisor too. If their firm is being purchased, for example, right? And they say, you know what, how do I make sure I don't want to be affiliated with this purchasing firm for whatever reason, right? How do I make sure that the next firm I go to doesn't ultimately get purchased by the same firm, right? And so now I know we've talked a lot about the RIA space and not to just push that, but I mean, again, going back to taking a look at some of these RIA platforms, being on a custodial platform like a Schwab or Fidelity gives you more autonomy, and it's less likely that one of these big firms is gonna purchase you. And then also if they do, right, your assets are already at a custodian, you can easily move them to a different platform.
100%. And I think that's super, super important. And it's a big concern a lot of financial advisors have, getting sucked back into the gravitational force of the firm that, they're potentially gonna leave. Just one other interesting thing that, I'll mention, a lot of financial advisors right now are getting really excited about the enterprise value, the other side of M&A that they can receive for their business. So wirehouse financial advisors are on the employee side that are typically getting 2 times trailing 12 revenue for their sunset, very rigid ways to be able to exit, and getting ordinary income tax treatment versus long-term capital gains. They're starting to learn on the independent side or the RIA side that a $4 million trailing 12 revenue practice can sell for 25 plus million dollars at long-term capital gains tax rates of 20% versus 40%, ordinary income tax rates. And when we do the math with financial advisors, they're just totally blown away. It's anywhere from like 2 to 3 times the extra, retirement income when they decide to monetize on the independent side, which could be the difference between like true generational wealth or just a retirement plan. So that's just something we've been having tons of conversations about. So a lot of advisors are picking up their head that way, but also there's been a lot of consolidation in the RIA space. I personally just worked with a financial advisor. He was part of a small boutique RIA, 500 million in assets. 7 years later, his firm got bought 4 different times and got rolled up to one of the largest RIAs in the industry. So this advisor used to have all of this different flexibility. Once again, had a conversation directly to the CEO because he can knock on his door next door, right? And now he's part of this, national $70 billion RIA that has a lot of cookie cutter options. And because of all of that consolidation, even on the RIA side, this advisor is looking to get some of his independence back. So all sorts of advisors looking to pick up their head and look for more autonomy.
No,
Yeah.
I think you're dead on, Corey. And I think it really creates some very, in my opinion, interesting and exciting conversations as you start to think through this planning or think through this evolution, right? And you're talking about the multiples that are out there, and and how buyers are looking more at EBITDA than they're looking at gross, and what that looks like. And then it gets into a conversation of maybe you're not growing like the advisor you described at 25% year over year. Maybe you're more in line with the 4 to 5% or something like that. And you're starting to look at a runway of 10, years or so, give or take, of how long am I going to be in the business, and trading equity in your practice for equity in one of these RIAs, right? And looking for, hey, someone's going to take a minority stake in my practice, and in exchange, I'm going to get, a minority stake in their business that's growing at 40% year over year. Or maybe I'm going to sell completely and stay and be compensated for serving my clients and maybe future clients that are acquired by the RIA, and taking, some cash, but also equity in that. And then when that consolidation and that roll up that you just described for that advisor happens, maybe they're getting another monetization event because of the equity they own in the RIA, right? And so they're not that worried. They're not that upset about it because the deal just keeps paying, years and years down the road. And so I think this whole M&A space, this whole enterprise value, the consolidation, there's so many ways for advisors to look at it. There's so many different options for them to look at it. And it's really dominating a lot of the conversations I'm having with advisors who are like, I'm not looking to leave tomorrow, but I'm looking at, like, this space it's not just changing firms. It's restructuring the way that they look at their business, they look at their wealth, they look at planning. And, I think it's fun to have conversations with not just, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Advisor, let's go look at 4 IBDs. It's like, let's look at an aggregator. Let's look at this. Let's look at this, and help to solidify their thought process on what they want their future to look like, right? It's not just saying, which flavor of vanilla do you want? It's like, let's look at the whole scope and really evaluate all of these different options. And then once we start to solidify that, digging deeper into those options, right? So it's an amazing area, I think, right now that is really coming up, and it's really fun and exciting.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
we could probably do a whole podcast around M&A and a number of topics that we touched on today. But I think all good points and all exciting stuff. And there's multiple reasons, like we talked about, that advisors are not only taking a look around, but are leaving.
100%. I mean, I think the message to financial advisors that are listening to this podcast is, I think a lot of financial advisors think if they have a conversation with someone like us, they're going to get pressured to start looking at firms right away, and they're going to have to make decisions, and they're going to have to, disrupt their life. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, in my opinion, the smartest conversations that advisors have are the people that are like, hey, I'm happy, I'm growing, I might move down the road. I want to start thinking about this in a systemized, digestible way where I could take small chunks at a time, not go to the grocery store when I'm hungry and make a decision off of emotion, and just have one contact where I can slowly learn over time what my options are, so I could get really tactical in terms of what my wish list is, like what the most important things are in my business. So when we go to market together, we know exactly what we want and what we don't want, so we don't get distracted by, a bunch of different things. So, I mean, I guess my message to advisors is, we have 15 consultants that we're having conversations weekly. And if you feel like you know what else is out there in the industry, like, respectively, you probably don't, because we have conversations every single week where we learn about some new firm that's solving some issue or solving something for a client that we've never heard of before. And we just have so many people with their ears to their ground, and you can really leverage that at your pace to learn what else is out there and make a smart decision.
Yeah, Corey, I would just echo onto that. It's, we hear it all the time where advisors are like, I don't want to waste your time, right? Because I'm not moving this year. And I always tell them, I'm like, you're never wasting my time. Like, that's what we're here for, is to build a relationship, over years, and be that resource to help you keep the ear to the ground, know what's going on out there. So when something, maybe one of the things that we talked about today gets triggered, you have somebody to go to.
Instead
Yep,
of having
no,
10 different
100%.
firms, knowing you're looking at firms.
Right. And then hitting you up all the time.
Guys, I had a blast having this conversation today. It's nice not just talking to myself on my podcast.
We're welcome. We should do it again sometime. I agree 100%.
Absolutely. But guys, is there anything else that you want to say prior to us departing?
No, thank you, Corey. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, thanks, Corey, for putting this together. You know, it was nice to bring firm transitions and the advisor strategy room together. If you're a fan of one, please listen to the other, and we'll be back to do it again, right?
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much, everyone, and I hope everyone has a great day.